Hello, this is a short recording talking about some revision techniques in preparation for your May exam. Looking at the May exam, if you're coming back from Easter break around about the 19th of April, that you can see that you've only really got about 4 weeks in preparation to revise for these resubmissions or resits. Presume you're resitting maybe just one of the papers. Obviously, if you've got to resit 2 papers or more, then you've got a lot more work required. So some simple things, some simple benchmarks and underlying principles of revision. So first of all, think about where you're going to do your revision. Try and find somewhere which is relaxing but not too relaxing, not sitting on the bed at home, not sitting in front of your games console but trying to pretend that it's not actually there. So somewhere like a desk, maybe a dining room table, where you can persuade your brain that when you sit there, that's for work purposes. Make the tasks specific to what you need to do. Try and make sure that you focus on the actual task in hand and that you don't get distracted, but make it also realistic. Also be aware of how much you can achieve in any session. And give yourself a variety, have something you like to do or some parts of the syllabus you're happy with, and then do the less favored parts of the actual revision you need to do, and then go back and do a bit more of something you like. That might be a break, it might be some parts of the revision you're more comfortable with. Good technique is to do yourself a timetable beforehand and actually work out when you're going to be available and put little reminders in your calendar. Possibly a reminder a few minutes beforehand if it's going to be the first session of the day. So you get yourself 10 minutes to prepare and get ready for a revision session. And make sure that you revise all the various areas, because this is your one opportunity to prepare yourself for these exams, and it's the one opportunity, and only you can do this. It's the one opportunity in readying yourself for these exams yet again. So make sure that you're prepared, make sure that you sort yourself out, you're organized, that you use your notes, and that you got with notes less is more. So the less you actually produce, the more clear the notes are, the more focused the notes are, the better. So first stage is making a plan. So it's really important that you make a plan, because when you make a plan that you'll be able to stick to, you'll be able to focus. But before you make a plan itself, you probably need to have a really good understanding of which parts of the syllabus you need to revise, and focus particularly on the parts of the syllabus you have difficulty with. Here is a link to some sample plans you can use, but there are plenty of other plans available online. Another thing to do before you set out on your revision is know what type of learning style you prefer. If you are a type of learner who likes to see things and read, that's a visual learner, then your learning style and your preferred way of revising is going to be different to somebody who likes to listen, or somebody's more practical in the form of kinesthetic. The auditory learner might wish to particularly focus on speaking out parts of their revision, which will really help them, not only in preparing on what they say, but in listening to themselves and even recording their revision and listening back over a period of time to help them to retrieve that information over and over. And kinesthetic learners are practical learners, which is good in some parts, but with the theoretical papers you're going to be doing in May, can be somewhat the worst of all the learning styles for these types of learning. And again, there's some online questionnaires here you can use to find out what learning style you are if you've not already. And bearing in mind, some Some believe that learning styles are no longer relevant, but it's a personal choice. And the more information you have about yourself and how you like to learn, the better it is for you to be able to identify your particular method of revision. Don't forget there's the revision website, and the revision website, if your center has its own duplicate of the full revision website, you might have just one link, or there's 3 links here to 3 standalone pages you can use, which are updated frequently also. You will also have your VLE or some sorts of resources online for your particular center. So I'd refer to those, and there's examples here of the types of information you probably have access to via that. So most of us use chunk learning. Chunk learning is a system where you give yourself possibly between 25 to 40 minutes to actually sit and focus on a particular area of the syllabus. Planning beforehand which areas you wish to really concentrate on for that particular session, and knowing that you're going to have a period afterwards and between chunk learning sessions to have a break, maybe have lunch, maybe have some sorts of sit down or do something else, or do things you enjoy like play games or what have you, but plan your day so that you get as much out of each day, including revision, including other things you prepare, particularly over the Easter period. And remember from the previous slide, you know, the method you want to use, the how you want to do it, is that you want to do something you like to do. You then want to do something less less enjoyable, and then you want to go back to do something you like to do. You wish to give your brain those breaks, those frequent breaks. Don't try and do too much, but also don't try and justify just doing 10 minutes of revision as enough. So how do we do it? We normally revise, we normally look at the materials, we normally try and memorize that, and we normally use some sort of question to test ourselves. And we do that for each and every section of the course. So it's circular, so you tend to go through this process over and over again. But in reality, we often don't remember a lot of what we learn long term. We have to be honest with ourselves. There's a system known as the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, and this shows you roughly how a standard human being forgets things very quickly at first, but over time continues to forget more and more. So you can see here, somebody within 20 minutes has forgotten nearly half of what they've just revised, and within the hour they may have retained only 40%, and so on, all the way through to a month later, they've only retained 21%. Now, you might think that's sort of says, okay, why bother? Because I'm never going to remember all this stuff. But by knowing that and knowing how the mind works, we can enhance how we learn, and we can enhance how we retrieve those memories and those areas of the revision we need to bring forward in those exam periods. So let's look at this practically. So we look at a topic, you might look at, 1.1 for unit 1, looking at hardware devices. And you go and learn a bit, and you might go and test yourself in a session, you might give yourself a bit of a break, and then you go and look at your next topic, and so on and so on. And that's good for retrieval. That will allow you, that give you the underpinning knowledge you need for any exam. But even better is the way of knowing how to store that information directly in your own brain and later retrieve it. So we need to look at a topic and learn that topic and test ourselves. We then need to move on to another topic. But before we move on to a third topic, you need to go back and look at the previous topic again. And by doing this, by bringing this information from if you like, long-term storage back to the, your current thinking, your current memory, then it's constantly enhancing those muscles within your brain, if you wish to think of them as that, your synapses, to bringing those memories more to the front and easily accessible, even under exam conditions. And likewise, after you've done your third topic, then you go back and look again at your first topic, look at your second topic, and then move on to your fourth topic. Now, of course, if that's all it was to revise, then everyone will be able to revise equally, and nobody will be better and nobody will be worse. But there's more to revision, and many people are extremely good at revising and therefore get higher results. And the belief is that much of what they've learned themselves is using higher forms of revision. So let's think of this as working smartly. We can work passively. We can read the textbooks. We can write things down, and we can reread our own notes. But we can also work actively. We can get our brain to work harder, even stimulating parts of the brain which normally wouldn't be used with just reading text. So for example, speaking aloud, or even having discussions or talking to other people about a particular subject is proven to bring a lot more into what you do. It gives you a lot more focus and therefore allows you to easily remember a subject matter. Now think about it. Your teachers can probably remember a lot of this subject matter very easily, and week after week after week they can bring back previous information and content. And a lot of that is not because they're superhuman, but because they taught you it. And by teaching somebody something, it's surprisingly simple then to reincorporate that, to bring it back from long-term memory. It's something to do with the structure of how we learn and how we organize our brain's memories and activities. So let's look at some passive revision. So you probably won't be too surprised to know that if you go and attend a lecture, say at a university or even at college, that a lot of what is said over a long period of time is not retained, possibly as little as 5%, shockingly. If you read the passage, such as a textbook, then over a long period of time you might retain as much as 20%. And likewise, visual learners will probably remember up to the same amount if they listen to the textbook or listen to their own notes. And if we demonstrate to others what we've learned, you can learn even more, maybe as much as 30%. But these are all passive revision techniques. These are all basically just giving your brain information and not really making your brain work with that information. So of course, active progresses further by retrieving that information in the form of a discussion, possibly by practicing in some way, possibly demonstrating. All these things allow your brain to reinvigorize, re-energize the way it uses that information. And just by actively using that information in some way makes your brain more proactive in the way it can deal with retrieval later on. So again, going back to teachers, it's very easy for teachers to remember something we've spoken about because we presented this and we taught it to a group, and it's actually been instilled in our brains much more clearly than if we sat there and just read the textbook ourselves. So you find teachers tend to be the people who do the same as what you need to do to revise, which is look at the videos, look at online sources, make notes, summarize, and then we teach it to you, which instills that knowledge within our own brains, which makes it easy for us to be able to bring that back at a later date. So let's look in a bit more detail. So these active revision techniques of discussing, of practicing, of doing, of demonstrating, of teaching others are really important. Even just recording your own voice and listening back to your own recordings later on can really, really help your revision. Of course, none of this is quick. It's very, very quick to read a passage of text and think you've now done your revision, tick some sort of box to say you've read that passage. But that's not revision. That's just your first pass at what could be a multiple pass stage to learn each and every part of the syllabus you need to learn. And here you can view a video which gives a lot more detail into how you can go about these techniques and different techniques you can employ. And you may have heard of a philosophy called Bloom's taxonomy. Well, this links in very closely because what Bloom's discovered was there's low order thinking skills such as remembering and understanding and applying. But then there's higher order skills such as analyzing, evaluating and creating. And these higher order skills are the ones which really make the difference when learning something in revision. And linking those to the active revision skills very closely match what we're doing is basically the same thing in whichever way you think about it. So it's really important to think about how you plan your time and developing these skills that your revision will be as successful as possible. Now, of course, at the end of the day, we're all human and we all forget. And we know this. We've talked about it already. So again, if you look at Ebbinghaus is quite clear. You will forget possibly as much as 80% of something you learn a month later. So surely that's the end of it. But no. The way the brain works is it can retrieve information much quicker and much more clearly the more it uses that part of the brain and those bits of information. So we need to constantly repeat looking at the same piece of information. So initially you might read the textbook and then you might test yourself and then you might bring it back and then you might create something artistic about, for example, a mind map to remind, and then you might talk about it and record yourself and listen back at a later point. And all these different techniques will enhance your understanding and your knowledge and make that part of the brain much more focused and much more easily retrievable. And Ebbinghaus quite clearly shows this. Just look at the drop in the very first cycle, but by just going back at a later date, the drop is significantly lower and lower still the more you go back over the same areas. So going back, looking at those diagrams we had before, where we go back and repeat, and we then move on to the next topic and then repeat the previous topics, that actually instantly brings back those memories much more clearly, much more accurately, and makes life easier in preparing for your exam. Distances alone, the reduction in how much you forget each and every time you recap on a topic is dramatic. And you don't know this until you give this option, give these techniques a try, because everyone will assume that just by reading the textbook you've done your bit. Now there's a video I'm about to show you which I will play through, but there's a link on there which you're more than welcome to listen to at any point in your own time from the PowerPoint.
What is the forgetting curve? Roll back to 1885 and Hermann Ebbinghaus was in the prime of his life. His beard had blossomed into a fantastic set of bristles and he was busy pioneering an experimental study of memory. His rigorous research method needed only one subject, himself. Herman got to work testing his memory and plotting the results. His findings showed just how rapidly information seeps out of our brains. Within a month, Herman had forgotten 90% of everything he'd originally learned. His findings have since been backed up by neuroscientists. Our brains operate a strict use it or lose it policy when it comes to information they store. In a training context, this is hugely counterproductive. If training is going to drive behaviour change, then it needs to stick inside your learners' brains. To make information sticky, it needs to be regularly reinforced. Retaining learning is like watering a plant. If you don't repeat the act regularly, you might lose it entirely. But if you look after it, it'll grow strong roots and stick around forever. For your own unforgettable learning experience, head to our website where you can sign up for a webinar, download our white papers, and see our knowledge retention tools in action.
Okay, and then a further video, which I won't play the full amount of, but again, you can come back to the PowerPoint and you can listen to, but it's got really key details in this video. So when you have a quiet moment, definitely worth 6 minutes of your time to listen to this video yourself.
Hey, what is going on, guys? So I think we can all agree that studying takes far too much time. So what I want to do in this video is show you guys how you can remember more of what you learn, even if you're spending fewer actual hours studying. And the way to do that is by spacing out that study time. This is a technique called spaced repetition, and to do it, you add progressively longer and longer time intervals in between each of your study sessions. So in this video, I want to show you exactly how you
Okay, so I'm not going to go through it right now because obviously you want to look at that in your own time. So what we've looked at, we just looked very briefly at spaced repetition. We've looked at Ebbinghaus. We've looked at, Bloom's taxonomy, and all these different techniques and these theories come together, combined to very closely identify with what each other says. That looking at the same piece of information and revising things in different ways, and in ways which use more of your higher order thinking, such as analyzing and creating, are actually better for revision and give you significantly better results. So what does this mean? So obviously we only have a number of weeks left before the exams, and ideally you'd want to spend possibly up to 6 weeks in preparing for each of these exams. But in reality, we really have more than a couple of weeks left. So week 1 might be during your Easter break. And during your Easter break, which is an ideal time when you have possibly a lot of available time available to revise and concentrate, but yet it's more difficult, understandably, to motivate yourself to do this, which is the main reason this video is being put out there, to make you realize the opportunity you now have. So week 1 we rise, week 2, week 3 you might be going back by then over the whole unit again, but you need to start looking at that information differently. You need to test to see how much you've regained from your previous revision, and you need to find new techniques which have higher success in allowing you to retain that information. And you might repeat, ideally, over the same unit 3, 4, 5 times within a month easily. The more you can repeat, the more you can go back, the more you can use different techniques, the better results you'll have in the exam, guaranteed. So let's look at it in practice. So you look at some practice questions, you've done your revision, you see how well you've done, and that will give you some good results overall. Looking at past papers and so on, getting to the point where you've done your revision, you're now preparing for that exam, and you're going through question paper after question paper, and you're getting hopefully good results. But even better than that, taking on even what you've learned in your revision, take a little bit longer and reflect on each of the questions and summarize the questions, especially ones you got right and ones you got wrong, and that gives you a much better result. But there is even more you can do. You can self-mark the questions and know where the actual questions will have gained and will have lost you those marks, but also refer to the examiner's reports for each of those questions. All of this, I'm sure, will be freely available on your virtual learning environment, or can be available on some online sources as well. Or ask your member of staff how you can get access to a sample number of questions with examiner's reports. Reading the examiner's report for each question tells you what the average person did right and what a lot of people did wrong. And over time, you will pick up on themes of which areas people tend to be strongest and which areas people tend to go wrongly and how they go wrongly and how they misread questions. And that all of that is valuable knowledge in preparing you for those exams in May. So remember, everyone is different. All these techniques are brilliant for some people and really don't work with others. You need to learn which techniques works best for you. So you need to revise uniquely according to your own particular style, be that learning style, be that mindset, whatever you want to call it. You need to know what method truly works for you. Unless you try it, don't look at some of these techniques and say that's not going to work for me. You can't judge it unless you try it. Occasionally, you will find a perfect method you never expected will have worked, and that is invaluable, especially if you're going on to higher education, when you can use the same techniques later on in your lifetime for higher ed and so on. Also, have other people test you. Don't be afraid to include family members, friends. Ask people to give you a bit of time during the day to help you test yourself. It could be verbal, it could be written, they could be checking your written results for you so there's less bias and so on. Try and use those higher order thinking techniques. Try and find ways of using the active revision techniques of using auditory, of teaching others and so on. Go through the videos we've included in this PowerPoint in more detail and maybe repeat the videos a few times, listening individually to the different types of techniques and how you can actually use them yourself. Various ways of looking at different techniques is about to follow. We're going to have a load of slides. I'm not going to go through them on this video. I'm going to leave that for you. But please spend a bit of time with the PowerPoint which is attached and have a look through the various techniques. Look through the videos and take time in planning your revision. All that being said, I wish you all success and I hope that you have a wonderful time revising, and it can be fun. It can be an opportunity for you to really get underpinning knowledge, to completely understand the subject matter and to have that confidence going into the exam that you really are prepared. And that is the one feeling you really want going into any exam. I'll let you get off, and I hope that you enjoy this video, and I wish you all success.